Tales of darkness, tales of light, tales of distant suns shining bright. Other worlds beyond our own, reminding us we are not alone. Chronicles of color, chord and word. The sweetest sound you've ever heard. These are wondrous stories indeed.
I'm your Wondrous Stories host, Greg Hinde, just as I am every Thursday night at 10 o'clock. I'm here to bring you the best in progressive rock. Thanks to Dave Wheatley for his hard-hitting Regent Rock Show lead-in, but now it's time to take a sharp left. Welcome to this very special edition of Wondrous Stories on 99.3 County FM. I'm your host, Greg Hinde, and with me this evening are a few seriously talented gentlemen who have certainly made their mark in the music industry. Both are well accomplished, and one of them is even an Academy Award and Golden Globe winner. Mychael, Danna, and Tim Clément are here to talk about their recently released remaster of a wonderful album called North of Niagara. Now, as we know, this is a progressive rock show, and I'm not going to label this particular album progressive rock, but I am definitely able to call it brave and unique, and as such, it is inherently progressive. Over the next hour, I will share some of this beautiful music with you, and I will also share a recent interview that I had with the guys. But first, here's Coots Paradise from Mychael, Danna, and Tim Clément's recently remastered North of Niagara.
That was Mychael, Danna, and Tim Clement's Coots Paradise from their wonderful and recently remastered North of Niagara, a rather unique instrumental journey along the Bruce Trail. I could make an attempt to describe this project myself. However, wouldn't it be better to hear it from the gentleman who created it? I just happen to have Tim and Mychael with me right now. Hi, guys. Thanks so much for joining me on this evening's Wondrous Stories.
Hey, Greg. Thanks for having us.
Great to be here, Greg.
Pleasure is all mine, guys. Hey, Mychael, can you give us a background on this incredible music release? It's unlike anything I've ever heard.
Well, Tim and I met in chemistry class. I guess we'll go back to the beginning here. We met Nelson High School, Burlington, Ontario, and chemistry was a subject I was pretty good at. And Tim, I came into the room, and when we were first day of chemistry, and we were all having to pick partners, and I saw Tim, and I knew he was a guitar player, so I thought, oh yeah, I want to sit beside that guy. He's really cool. He had great clothes, great hair, and anyway, long story short, by the end of the year, I was getting 54 or 5 in chemistry. But Tim and I had, some other chemistry going, and we were in a band for years, a progressive rock band, kind of a new wave band. And eventually he and I started staying after practice, just the two of us, and kind of improvising and doing, kind of ambient things. And Tim bought these 2 tape recorders and did these tape loop things, which were super cool. And then, he and I started playing together and having so much fun that we actually started performing live and entered some contests and won a band contest, which probably enraged a lot of people that like drums. Just had a great time, and exploring a kind of music that was really new, that really Brian Eno kind of spearheaded this ambient music. And for us, we kind of put an environmental kind of thread through it. It was something that was really inspired by our surroundings in Canada. Tim's family comes from Northern Ontario and Quebec, and he's lived up there, and he's spent some time up there, and we've spent a lot of time up there together, and we use recordings of natural sounds and found that as a kind of jumping off point for a lot of our music. So eventually, after we did a few records together, which I'm really proud of, and then in the mid 90s we did a record called North of Niagara, where we inspired directly from the Bruce Trail, which everyone in Southern Ontario knows it. And for us growing up in Burlington, it was something, on a Saturday morning you'd hop over to Mount Nemo or walk the trail. In the winter even, I camped on it once, which I believe is illegal, but that's what happened. And and so it just seemed like these stops along the way were little markers, emotional markers, and places that we could really kind of sit with a tape recorder, record the ambiences, and then make a piece that had the emotional content for us of that place and inspired by it. So that's the record that we made in the 90s, North of Niagara. I believe it has 12 cuts on it, maybe, Tim? But yeah, something like that. And then just to talk about the re-release, I guess, after this is 25 years later, and it's a record that of all the music I've done and Tim has done, and he feels the same, there's something just really special about this. It's something I've listened to constantly since then. My My children listened to it. And we decided that it needed a proper remastering and just kind of brought up to proper modern specs and to, dust it off and put it back out into the world again on all the new modern streaming options and so on. So that was our project for last year.
And what a project, and what a time to do it. I mean, it probably gave you the ability to properly focus on it, given that we were all kind of locked in and looking for things to do. I mean, that probably presented an open door to you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I just want to get back to sort of my impression of meeting Mychael. It was indeed just meeting in chemistry class, like you said, there was a certain chemistry between us. It was almost poetic. We liked the same music, the same movies, the same hockey team, and it wasn't the Leafs, by the way.
I was hoping you wouldn't bring that up.
No. Sometimes, at times, the same girls, and luckily that didn't come between us. But it made making music together come really naturally and easily. I liked everything he brought to the table, and I remember during lunch breaks at school, in the library, they had a listening room, and you could rent a turntable and a headphone station there, and we'd plug in our headphones and we'd bring albums. And I would be bringing like Italian prog rock, stuff like Banco and
PFM. And
yeah, Mychael would be bringing Palestrina and Debussy and stuff like that. We just enjoyed kind of expanding each other's horizons back then.
I love that. I mean, and even as prog goes, that's pretty eclectic prog. I mean, most people when they think of prog, they think Floyd, Genesis, King Crimson, on and on. Oh, and by the way, I'm wearing my badge here. But so I mean, Banco and PFM. I mean, that is deep prog, and Gentle Giant. I put in sort of the same category. But you mentioned Mychael, Brian Eno. And it calls to mind that, myself growing up as a big music fan, I was a nerd like you guys. I mean, I obsessed over music. And I was the first one I knew that owned No Pussyfooting, Fripp and Eno. I was already a Fripp fan because of King Crimson, of course. But when I heard that album, I'll admit I didn't get it at first. But then multiple listens, I started to realize the beauty and the simplicity. And you guys kind of took that and you expanded upon it, and you sort of introduced this environmental component to it. And the whole thing blends together so nicely. And obviously this is a listening experience for just about anybody. I don't want to call it a progressive CD. It's not. It's really different and unique, but it could fit in any environment. It could be a Sunday afternoon. It could be headphones on, falling asleep for a nap. And I've already learned that firsthand. So, before we go any further, I'd really like to get back into the music if we could tee up another cut. Tim, what can you tell me about this next song, Headwater Trail?
Headwater Trail is one of the more atmospheric pieces on the album. We recorded several of these. You might think of them as soundscapes or tone poems or textures. They often include environmental sounds as well, and I think in this case it's a thunderstorm. And we would sequence these types of environmental pieces in between some of the more melodic, structured pieces that would feature piano or other orchestral instruments. And I really feel like it enhances that sense of being on a journey. And of course, in this case, the journey is the Bruce Trail. I think of these types of pieces as painting with sound or painting with music, and it's really the glue that holds the whole journey together.
Painting with music is exactly right. You can't help but listen to it and not envision yourself walking through, a tranquil forest with nothing but beauty and nature surrounding you. Okay, that's a great tee up. So from north of Niagara, this is Tim Clement and Mychael Danna's Headwater Trail.
More North of Niagara with Tim Clement and Mychael Danna when we return from the break.
Welcome back to Wondrous Stories on 99.3 County FM.
Welcome back to Wondrous Stories, the best in progressive rock on 99.3 County FM. I'm your host, Greg Hinde. That was Mount Nemo from the recently released North of Niagara, composed and performed by Tim Clement and Mychael Danna. I recently sat down and chatted with the guys. Let's get back to that and find out a little bit more about this unique project.
Tim, I understand that you and Mychael had actually written and recorded a trio of albums out in the woods in Northern Ontario in a log house, no less. Mychael, you mentioned this. Can you expand upon that a bit and talk about that experience and how it all connects to North of Niagara?
Yeah, it was 1980 when my wife and I relocated from Burlington up to a small town about 30 or 40 miles north of Bancroft in the countryside near Maynooth. We had a 600-acre property there, and Mychael would come up in the summers. We'd record there. The place was so remote, there was no hydro coming to it. So we had to use a generator, which we set up in the barn several hundred feet away. We surrounded this generator with mattresses and styrofoam and everything to soundproof it, and ran these hundreds of feet of cable to the studio there, the home studio, where we recorded 3 albums: A Gradual Awakening, Summerland, and Another Sun. And I remember that since Mychael and I wanted to include some of the woodland sounds that were all around us, getting up at 5 a.m. and lugging this 80-pound Studer Revox studio tape deck down to a little creek that was on the property, again, hundreds of feet away, with the long extension cords running from the generator in the barn. And that was the beginning of using natural environmental sounds in our music, which became our signature sound, you might say, which is also something we used on North of Niagara.
Incredible. I love that. Nothing like getting back to nature to find yourself, well, your creative self, of course. Mychael, given that, Wonder Stories is a progressive rock program, I'd like to talk a little bit more about Darwin. I've featured Darwin on my show several times now, and it has all the elements, all the trademarks. It's grandiose, it's complex, it's got the classical elements. Mid 70s to late 70s. You touched on it briefly, but was there a scene, or were you really, kind of a lone wolf?
No, there definitely was progressive rock in the air, no doubt. Our friends in, high schools divide into, people who like Steve Miller, people like this new thing called disco at the time, like those people. And then us nerdy guys who liked Mellotrons and Keith Emerson, and we'd argue whether Rick Wakeman or Keith Emerson was a better keyboard player. And then Tim's older brother got us into all the really cool stuff, the European, Italian bands and British, more underground bands. And we were really into that, and had so much fun with it. And synthesizers and Mellotrons were my thing, and Tim guitars, and and so that kind of, I see it as a really sensible evolution from that progressive rock heyday, and then into ambient music, and then making it our own and making it, well, frankly, Canadian, kind of bringing in the environment. And by the way, Tim, I love that reference to hydro when you said the hydro. And I live in Southern California here, and once in a while I accidentally say hydro, and people look at me, hydro, what? That means water. What are you talking about? The hydro went out, eh?
North of Niagara Falls.
Yeah, north of
Yeah.
No, we would kill for Niagara Falls around here in Southern California, but and also I have to say, Greg, I just love imagining the sounds of our music here bouncing off the hills of Mount Nemo and so on, and in Southern Ontario. It's really moving to think of it. And I know you guys have snow up there, and
we do.
Dark nights driving. I hope somebody's driving out there in a dark road and listening to this music, because I remember that feeling. I listened to a lot of great music on those side roads north of Burlington. Me and Tim would go driving up there and up further north and so on. So yeah, it's really special for us to revisit this music, and it was a bit of a journey to technically bring it back up to spec and really give it the TLC that it deserved. But it was a really fun project, and I'm really proud of it. It is nice to play it in order because it is a journey, and I know in streaming nowadays everyone just listens to one cut and then it bounces somewhere else. But for us, we did want to release it as a CD as well, so that you do listen to it in order, which it was kind of carefully planned out to be that way.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, that is the world that we live in now. And, I read, guys like Roger Waters, who's, vehemently opposed to breaking up an album. How can you listen to Money before you hear Breathe? I mean, it's impossible to conceive of. And yet that is the world we live in. But you guys, I've said it already, but I have to compliment you. This is such a brilliant CD, and I can't overstate how different it is. I mean, you could try to lump it into a category. You can call it environmental, you can call it new age, you can call it this, you can call it that, but really it's got all of these other elements that are sort of intangible, but they're all there. You feel it. It's a journey as you listen. I can't overstate it. But I do have to go back a little bit, and I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that you guys have a direct connection to one of my good friends here in Prince Edward County, that being Bill Wood, of course. I've really grown to love this guy, and you know who I'm talking about, of course, and he sang on the People Left Behind. And that is what we are about to hear. Tim, you want to very quickly talk about how the People Left Behind came about, because I'm aware there's a bit of a story there.
I'd like to jump back first to how Mychael and I started working with Bill. Bill and I met in the early 70s, 14 years old, literally born a few hours apart, soulmates, and became instant best buddies. Formed a glam rock band, complete with all the accoutrements you might expect: the platform boots, satin clothes, the long streaked shaggy hair, and glitter everywhere, and played mostly top 40 material until Mychael joined the band a couple of years later. Yeah, and so getting back to the People Left Behind, we're going back over 40 years here. Darwin, the band I was in with Mychael and Bill at the helm as lead vocalist. We won the 1976 Burlington Band Contest. And the following year, Mychael and I entered on our own as an ambient duo, and we won that one as well. Much to the chagrin of our competitors, these hot bar bands who claimed it was rigged. How could these two guys with burning incense and candles, and we even brought a tree on stage, how could they beat us? But anyways, the judges decided we had the most potential. So the first prize was recording time and 500 vinyl records pressed from that recording session. The People Left Behind is one of the songs we recorded for that. Bill and I listened to a lot of Van de Graaff Generator back then, and you might hear a little bit of Peter Hamel influence there in his voice. The delivery and the power that comes through, he does an amazing job.
Well, that's a great tee up. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Danna and Clément's The People Left Behind.
Take your tools, old servants mine, and work upon the field. The harvest sun sinks low, I wish the good fruit of my seed. And each within his name a different claim to fame. And each without a word, although I heard the story the same. He stands with many men, though few men know his name. Cries out his glory and whispers of his pain. I stand here shaken by tears of human rain. The sun is gone, the bitter winds blow past the silver moon. Burning embers kiss the ground, men fight against the gloom. And each within his name a different claim to flame. And each without a word, although I heard the story the same. He stands with many men, though few men know his name. Cries out his glory and whispers of his pain. I stand there shaken by tears of human rain.
More with Tim Clement and Mychael Danna when we return from the break.
You are listening to Wondrous Stories.
You are
the best
listening
in
to Wondrous
progressive rock on
Stories. Your best in
99.3
progressive
County.
rock on
You are listening to
99.3
Wondrous
County
Stories.
FM.
The best in progressive rock on 99.3 County.
Welcome back to Wondrous Stories on 99.3 County FM. I'm your host, Greg Hinde, and I am very excited to be featuring a newly remastered 25th anniversary edition of North of Niagara, a wonderful and unique collection of instrumental songs inspired by locations along the Bruce Trail. The music is composed and performed by Tim Clement and Mychael Danna. I recently had a chance to meet with the guys.
Reading through your bio, I noticed that both of you spent time composing music for the McLaughlin Planetarium star shows back in the 80s and 90s. What can you tell us about your time at the planetarium? That question's for either one of you or both.
Well, I went to the University of Toronto. So after our Darwin days and our ill-fated tour of Eastern Canada, there's a lot of stories there, but anyway, we all kind of got into various ways of moving forward, and Bill went out east to college, and I went to the University of Toronto to study music composition, and and then while I was there, I was literally right next door to the planetarium. And as a kid, I'd always been really interested in astronomy. So I went to the planetarium a lot, and I learned that there actually was a guy who had a studio in there and wrote music for it. So I ended up meeting him, and a few years later, actually the same month I kind of graduated from the University of Toronto, he quit that job and I ended up getting it. So I was there for about 4 years and just had a blast, kind of combining the two things I love, astronomy and music. And then after I left, Tim stepped in and did it for a while until the planetarium unfortunately closed, which it still is. I know there's various people trying to get a planetarium back into Toronto, but it's pretty tragic that there isn't one. But that's how we were there. And I think again, it just comes back to the thing that both Tim and I are so inspired by, and the thing that makes us feel like making music is our country and our home and the sky above us and the sounds of nature. And those are the things that have always really spoken to us. And it's a thing that when we're together, that's what we make music kind of inspired by.
No, and that's incredible. I have a personal connection to those star shows. I met my wife in 1989. Meredith, my wife, she was interested in seeing one of those planetarium shows. So we went down there early in our relationship. We saw Star Show, and Mychael, you would have been the one composing the background. Wow. So I have to thank you for providing part of the soundtrack to our budding relationship at the time.
That's amazing. Yes, I was definitely there in 89. Yeah. Yeah.
And we've been married 31 years and couldn't be happier. Thank you for that. And I know you're both soundtrack composers, but you have different specialties. Tim, you've composed music for several documentary soundtracks. What are some of the projects you've worked on, and is there one that you're most proud of?
Yeah, I've been more focused on scoring documentary films, whereas Mychael is working on feature films down in LA. I'd have to say one of the most memorable was a film called Return to Kandahar, a story of a Canadian Afghan woman, journalist here in Toronto, actually, and her quest, her journey to return to Afghanistan to find her childhood friend who she'd lost touch with during the Taliban regime. I had the good fortune of finding and working with a very talented group of Afghan musicians here in Toronto for the film score. And one of the best parts was they would bring their traditional Afghan cuisine, just a big spread to the studio every afternoon. It was wonderful.
I am going to look that up.
Yeah.
No, brilliant. I look forward to seeing that and hearing that. And Mychael, elephant in the room, you are a film composer. And of course, you even won an Academy Award and Golden Globe for Best Original Score for your work on 2012's Life of Pi. First of all, big congratulations to you. that was a groundbreaking film. Can you talk a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, I also, Tim makes me think, I also was lucky enough to work on a film where I worked with Afghan musicians, a film called The Breadwinner, which is, it was actually an Irish director who I'm strangely enough working right now with on another film, Nora Toomey, a wonderful director. And but the nice thing is it's a Canadian book, and it's really a wonderful book, and just I think a really beautiful and probably not very well known, certainly not down here. Although actually in one of my kids' classes they watched the film. But The Breadwinner is a really wonderful film, and I also had that wonderful experience of working with Afghan musicians, and that's something that, again, I think I have Canada to thank for the kind of open-minded multiculturalism, and that's been a big part of my career in combining, different cultural musics together, and in a kind of hopefully respectful way. And so that's definitely something else that I would say makes me distinctly Canadian.
Yeah, and getting back to Life of Pi for a second, I remember reading there was a song that you wrote that I believe one of the actors sang in the movie.
Yeah, actually, it's the very opening of the film. We begin in Little Pi's father's zoo, so we were kind of introduced to this fantastical zoological paradise of all these different animals, and they're beautiful. It's kind of through the eyes of a child, because, of course, actually another Canadian book, now that we think about it, Life of Pi, and it, of course, we rip Pi away from this world and throw him into a lifeboat on the ocean, but we wanted to build this sense of how he grew up in this beautiful, warm place surrounded by the love of his parents and a mother's love. So I wrote a lullaby in the local language, and found this wonderful South Indian singer, Bombay Jayashree, to sing it. So it's actually not an actor, but she's kind of a famous filmy singer as well in India. But yeah, we worked together on that in India and wrote it together. She wrote these beautiful lullaby words, and it's a really nice moment in the film. We begin in a really beautiful place before we descend into the depths of hell, basically.
Well, there's so much going on in that film, and we don't want to go off on a tangent, but there was a lot more than was on the surface. And as you were composing, obviously you're composing to a script and a story, because really there's a lot of green screen there. There's a lot of CGI, so you had to work out of your head a lot. I'm assuming.
Yes, that's true, and that's the case with a lot of films these days that involve graphics, computer generated graphics like that. The director becomes very important at those moments, because they have to describe not only what you're seeing other than a green screen, but also the emotional effect it has on or will have on you. So yeah, it takes more imagination, but it often happens now that the first time I really see the film is at the premiere. That's what's
but isn't that a nice way to enjoy it, though? The element of surprise, seeing your hard work come to fruition. Well, hopefully it's a nice experience. Hopefully it isn't, what have you done?
Well, I think as a composer, you're trying to get control a lot of the time, but you do bring up an interesting question, and that's the idea of letting go of and letting things happen, which is an important part of creativity. And it's something that I think Tim has always been really, that's something that I've always from the beginning admired about Tim, is that he, and I have to say, like, if someone asked me who are my greatest teachers, composition teachers, Tim would be up near the top of the list, because he taught me about chance and faith and having openness to what happens next, what the universe will add to the mix, as opposed to trying to control every moment of the piece. So it's a beautiful lesson. I'm still trying to learn it, but it's something that Tim is really great with, and it's, you know, it's one of the reasons that we love working with each other, because we both bring something pretty different to the mix, I think.
I'd just like to add to that a little, Michael, and thank you so much. I mean, we're from very different backgrounds. Michael, as he's mentioned, is classically trained, went to the U of T got his master's in composition. I come from more of a visual art and experimental music background. But we've always shared this unspoken understanding or aesthetic when it comes to music. I can't really put my finger on it, and I don't want to. I don't want to break the spell.
That's right.
But it's something about writing music about some other place. It's all, you know, it's the best I can think of it. Like somewhere we'd maybe rather be. And as far as letting go, I've got one trick I've used that I don't think I've ever told you about it, Michael. And it was used in Silent Lake, is that I would turn the sound off before I'd start playing the keyboard. Like I wouldn't hear what I was playing at all. And I wouldn't really pay attention to my hands either. And I did that a lot. And 9 times out of 10, it ended up being garbage, of course, as you'd expect. But every now and then, something magical would happen, something I'd never come up with otherwise.
Still learning after all these years. You know, that really is what's so captivating and addictive about being a composer, making music, is that there is no answer. There's no final answer. There's no way to do this correctly. And what we're trying to grab onto is just so vaporous and mysterious that, yeah, just that's the thing that keeps me doing this every day.
Oh, I totally get that. It's journey, it's process. It's, you know, never arriving, but, you know, forever trying to get there. So I'd like to cut to some more music here. Could you briefly talk about Evening? What's the inspiration there?
I think Tim put it beautifully. It's a piece about another place, and it's inspired by the feeling that you feel when you're on the Bruce Trail. But that's one of the few that's not really directly linked, and so it has a bit of a fantastical name. Most of the other titles of the tracks are actual sites along the Bruce Trail. You have Coots Paradise and Old Mill Road and Mount Nemo and Crooks Hollow and Crawford Lake and places like that people know. But Evening is a bit of a fantastical stop along the way.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Tim Clement and Mychael Danna's Evening from north of Niagara.
Welcome back to Wondrous Stories on 99.3 County FM.
Welcome back to Wondrous Stories on 99.3 County FM. I'm your host, Greg Hinde, and I am very excited to be featuring a newly remastered 25th anniversary edition of North of Niagara, a wonderful and unique collection of instrumental songs inspired by locations along the Bruce Trail. The music is composed and performed by Tim Clement and Mychael Danna. We just heard the song Old Mail Road. I recently had a chance to meet with the guys who graciously agreed to talk to me about North of Niagara, among other things. Let's get back to that conversation.
Okay, guys, it's time for the obligatory desert island question, and it's for both of you. Which two albums would you each take with you to your own respective desert island, and why? Mychael, why don't you kick it off?
Can I float on a log over to Tim's island once in a while? Or
No. You are isolated. There's no sharing. You are alone, Mychael.
But wait, do I have hydro on my island where I can actually play, or electricity as we call it here in California?
Only enough to spin the turntable.
Well, and this sounds like a shameless plug for North of Niagara, but
go for it. Honest
to God, cross my heart, hope to die, North of Niagara would be.
That's a fair answer.
It honestly would, and now I feel like a LA sleazebag for saying that, but which
no.
But honestly, it's a record that means that much to me. The other one, I don't know. Honestly, I'd probably bring some classic prog rock. Right now I'm going through Selling England by the Pound phase. That's what man. I mean, there's so many to choose from, but yeah, it'd probably be those two records.
Two great choices. I wouldn't even pick one over the other. They're both brilliant. Just quickly as an aside, I saw the Musical Box do Selling England a few years ago, me and my buddy Ray, and wow, I was mesmerized. You know what? I sat back far enough that I could actually suspend, belief. And right in front of me, that was Genesis. The way they set up the stage and everything was perfect. So Tim, what about you?
Well, Mychael stole my first pick.
You can take that one too. You have more. There's two copies of it.
Well, it's really difficult to choose, but I'll pick from the 70s since this is generally a prog rock show that you have, Greg. So I'm going to go with Banco del Mucho Sorcoso.
Yeah.
Their Darwin album, which is, we named our band after that record.
Yes, and you had told me that story.
Right. And I guess second choice, I'm a French-Canadian. I'm going to go with Harmonium's L'Epitade.
Tim, I play a lot of harmonium. They kind of spearhead a whole movement of French prog bands.
Yeah, there were several. With Sagan and Cano was actually on the border of Quebec, but yeah, I think the French prog was right up there with the Italians.
I agree. I love harmonium in particular. Unfortunately, we got to wrap it up. It's been an honor and a privilege, Mychael and Tim. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg.
Thanks, Greg.
My pleasure. Back in a moment with more Wondrous Stories on 99.3 County FM.
Well, that wraps up this look at North of Niagara, a beautiful and contemplative walk along the Bruce Trail. Big thanks to its creators, Tim Clement and Mychael Danna, for joining me in discussion and sharing some of their experiences along their musical journey. North of Niagara is now available on Bandcamp and most streaming services. To learn more about the artists and the album, visit their website at mychaeldana-timclement.com. That is Mychael with a Y, MychaeldANNA-Tim Clement, TIMCLEMENT.com. The website also includes YouTube links to music videos produced by Tim for many of the tracks from North of Niagara, as well as links to both Tim and Mychael's individual websites. Thank you so much for tuning in. Have a great week. Greg Hinde out from the 99.3 County FM Control Tower.